People think strength is loud. They think it announces itself, demands attention, fills the room with confidence and noise. But that's not the kind of strength the military teaches you. Real strength stays quiet. It waits. It holds the line while everyone else is laughing, joking, and underestimating the person standing right in front of them. My name is Victoria Hayes. I'm 34 years old, a major in the United States Air Force, and for most of my career, I learned how to be invisible in rooms where my service was misunderstood. I learned how to let jokes slide. How to smile when people reduced years of responsibility to paperwork. How to keep the peace, even when it cost me something. That night, at my sister's backyard barbecue, I finally stopped doing that. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been laughed at by someone you once defended? Dismissed by people who never bothered to understand what you carried? If you have, you're not alone. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being quietly humiliated, this story might sound uncomfortably familiar. I arrived at my sister Emily's house at exactly 1700 hours, still in my dress blues, because the ceremony on base had run long and I'd driven straight there without stopping. The late afternoon sun caught the silver oak leaves on my collar as I stepped out of my car, for years as a major reflecting back at me in polished metal. I hadn't planned to wear my uniform to a family gathering, but missing my sister's birthday entirely hadn't felt like an option either. My parents saw me first. My mother's face lit up, then softened, pride mixing with concern the way it always did when she saw me in uniform. My father raised his beer in greeting, his smile simple and steady, the kind that said he didn't fully understand my world but respected the weight of it. Emily spotted me from the patio and waved, already surrounded by friends and laughter. She'd always been the easy one, the social one, the one who fit naturally into rooms like this. Her husband, Mark Turner, noticed me a moment later. Mark had served 4 years as an enlisted Marine, got out, and built a successful security contracting business with some of his former squad mates. I respected the work he'd done to build that life. What I didn't respect was the way, somewhere along the line, that success had turned into authority over everyone else's service, especially mine. "Well, look who finally made it," Mark announced to the group near the grill. "Clipboard Queen herself." The laughter came fast and easy, like they'd rehearsed it. That nickname had started months earlier after I'd mentioned coordinating a large-scale training exercise. No one seemed interested in the fact that the exercise involved dozens of aircraft, thousands of personnel, and coordination across multiple commands. Clipboard was easier. It fit the version of me they'd decided to see. Emily hugged me carefully, avoiding my uniform. "You look very official," she said with a smile. "Did you win something?" "Squadron recognition," I replied. "Team effort." Mark clapped my shoulder, a little harder than necessary. "Beer?" "Water's fine." He grinned. "Right. Gotta stay sharp for all that paperwork." More laughter. I smiled thinly and said nothing. I'd learned that responding only fed it, and for years, maintaining family peace had felt more important than defending my record to people who had already made up their minds. Most of Mark's friends blurred together at this point, loud, confident, comfortable taking up space. But one man stood out. Gunny Morales, a former gunnery sergeant with multiple combat tours, didn't laugh. He just nodded at me, calm, observant, like someone who didn't need to perform for approval. His presence felt different, grounded, and I noticed it even if I didn't yet understand why. Emily slipped a cup of water into my hand. "Ignore them," she whispered. "You know how they get." I did know. It had been building for a long time. The jokes framed as camaraderie. The comments about the Air Force being the easy branch. The implication that my work mattered less because it didn't look like theirs. I'd let it go again and again, telling myself it wasn't worth the effort to explain missions that couldn't be discussed anyway, or experiences that didn't translate into backyard conversation. But something felt different that afternoon. Maybe it was the ceremony I'd just left, where a senior officer spoke quietly about lives protected from above. Maybe it was exhaustion from another 70-hour week preparing for an inspection. Or maybe I was just done making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. One of Mark's friends leaned toward me. Emily was telling us about your deployments. Sounds like you got to see some interesting places. A few, I said carefully. Must be nice, Mark cut in, already smiling. Flying over everything. Climate-controlled cockpit, hot meals. Not like boots on the ground, but hey, someone's gotta manage supplies, right? The dismissal was casual, practiced, wrapped in just enough humor that calling it out would make me look sensitive. Emily shot him a look, but didn't say anything. She laughed instead, and that stung more than the joke itself. I thought about people I'd lost. About long nights coordinating missions where one wrong calculation could cost lives. About conversations with families that would never make it into stories like these. But I didn't say any of that. Some truths don't belong at barbecues. Paperwork keeps the machine running, I said evenly. Mark laughed. See? She gets it. Nothing wrong with a desk job. Gunny Morales was watching me now, his expression unreadable. My father appeared, asking if I could help with the salad. I followed him into the kitchen, grateful for the quiet. My mother looked at me with concern. You okay, honey? Just tired, I said, and it was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. You've always been patient, my father said, tearing lettuce into a bowl. Even when you were little. Patience had kept people alive in my career. It had served me well. But standing there in my parents' kitchen, still in uniform, something shifted. I realized patience and erasure weren't the same thing, and I'd been accepting too much of the latter. When we went back outside, the music was louder, the beer flowing freely. Mark was holding court by the grill, surrounded by his friends, telling a story about a contract gone wrong overseas. The group leaned in, engaged, impressed. I should have left then. I didn't. Hey, Vic, Mark called out. Come settle something for us. I stepped into the circle. The conversation paused, and I felt like a curiosity more than a participant. We're talking call signs, he said. Pilots have those, right? Like Top Gun. Some do, I replied. So what's yours? He paused, grinning at his friends. Let me guess. Spreadsheet. Requisition. Clipboard 6. The laughter hit harder this time. Even some of the neighbors chuckled. Emily laughed too, covering her mouth like she knew she shouldn't but didn't stop herself. I waited. I let the sound die down. I let the silence stretch just long enough to be noticed. Then I looked directly at Mark and said, calmly, clearly, without apology, Valkyrie 6. Gunny Morales froze mid-sip. He lowered his beer slowly. Wait, he said quietly. Valkyrie 6. He stood up straight, posture snapping into something familiar and serious. Ma'am. I apologize. I didn't realize. The yard went silent. And in that silence, everything began to change. The silence that followed my call sign didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Someone near the speaker turned the music down without realizing it. All eyes shifted, not toward Mark, not toward the grill, but toward the man who had just stood up straight in my parents' backyard. Gunny Morales looked at me like he was trying to reconcile two versions of the same story. The woman he'd watched absorb jokes without reaction, and the officer whose call sign carried weight he recognized immediately. Valkyrie 6, he said again, slower this time, like he was testing the sound of it. Air Support Coordination, Eastern Sector, Anbar Province. Yes, I replied, keeping my voice steady. That was my assignment. He exhaled, sharp and controlled. My convoy was hit out there. 209. 7 vehicles. 53 Marines. He glanced around the circle, then back at me. We called for air support. Valkyrie Flight answered in under 8 minutes. The laughter that had filled the yard moments earlier was gone. Mark's smile had frozen, confusion creeping in as the tone shifted away from humor and into something serious. They held coverage while we evacuated our wounded, Gunny continued. Dropped danger close without a single friendly casualty. Every Marine in that convoy made it home. No one spoke. I felt Emily's eyes on me, sharp now, searching my face like she was seeing me for the first time. I coordinated missions across multiple sectors, I said evenly. Anbar was one of them. One of the younger guys finally broke the silence. Wait, you mean you were the one actually running that? I was part of the command team responsible for it, I answered. Yes. Gunny nodded once, then turned to his friends. You have any idea how rare that level of precision is? Whoever ran Valkyrie 6 knew exactly what they were doing. Mark cleared his throat. Why didn't you ever say any of this? I met his gaze. You never asked. That landed harder than anything else I could have said. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, realizing the truth in that statement. The assumptions had always been easier than curiosity. Emily stepped forward, her voice quieter now. Vic, you never told me it was like that. I didn't think you wanted to hear it, I said. And honestly, I didn't think it mattered to you. Gunny was still standing, uncomfortable now, like he'd just realized he'd been part of something he didn't respect. Ma'am, he said carefully, we owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, I replied. You did your job. I did mine. He shook his head. It's more than that. We've been joking. Minimizing. That wasn't earned. Mark finally found his voice again. I was just messing around. You know how it is. No, I said calmly. I know how it was. And I know how it felt. That was the moment the room truly shifted. This wasn't about call signs anymore. It was about boundaries. About respect that had been assumed rather than given. Emily's face flushed. I didn't mean it like that. I thought you didn't care. I cared, I said. I just didn't fight back. Gunny nodded slowly. The best officers I ever served under never talked about what they did. They didn't have to. But that doesn't give anyone the right to erase it. The circle broke apart then, conversations restarting in lower tones, awkward and uncertain. People avoided my eyes or offered small nods, suddenly aware that the story they'd been telling themselves didn't match reality. I turned to Emily. Happy birthday, I said softly. I'm glad I came. Vic, wait, she said quickly. Don't go yet. I should, I replied. I have an early morning. I walked back through the house alone, past half-empty cups and untouched food, grabbed my keys from the counter, and left without looking back. My parents watched from the doorway. My mother started to follow me, but my father stopped her gently. He understood. This wasn't something that needed to be smoothed over immediately. The drive back to base was quiet. 40 minutes of headlights and open road, my hands steady on the wheel, my breathing controlled. I wasn't angry. I felt clear. Like something I'd been carrying had finally been set down. At the gate, the security guard checked my ID and saluted. I returned it automatically and drove on, the familiar surroundings grounding me. Inside my apartment, I removed my uniform carefully, hung it precisely, and sat on the edge of my bed in the silence. My phone buzzed. Emily. Then my mother. Then my father, a single message that read, "Take your time. We're here." I turned the phone face down. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed space to understand what had just happened. I'd told the truth plainly, without explanation or apology. And the truth had done what it always does. It had separated discomfort from clarity. The next morning, I went back to work like nothing had happened. Briefings. Reports. Meetings. The controlled environment where competence was measured in outcomes, not jokes. That's where Captain Leah O'Connell found me at 1900 hours, still reviewing readiness reports. "Ma'am," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "you've been here since before sunrise." "Almost done," I replied. She didn't leave. "You seem off. Everything okay?" "Family situation," I said. "Nothing operational." She nodded, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, you taught me that leadership means not letting people define your value for you. Watching you, it changed how I see this job." That mattered more than she knew. When she left, I checked my phone. 7 missed messages from Emily. 3 from my mother. 1 from my father. Still nothing from Mark. I didn't return any of them. The next family gathering invitation came a week later. I declined politely. So did the next one. Emily's messages shifted from apologetic to defensive to quiet. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was creating space. The kind I should have created a long time ago. 3 weeks after the barbecue, Emily showed up at the base visitor center. The guard called my office. "Ma'am, you have a civilian asking for you." "I'll be there in 5 minutes," I said. She looked out of place in the sterile lobby, sundress among uniforms, nervous energy written all over her face. "Can we talk?" she asked. "There's a coffee place just off base." We sat across from each other, cups untouched. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For laughing. For not stopping it. I didn't understand." "I'm not upset because you didn't understand," I replied. "I'm upset because you didn't try." She swallowed hard. "Mark wants to apologize. Then he can call me." She nodded. "I miss you." "I miss you too," I said. "But I don't miss who I had to be around you." We parted without resolution, but with honesty. And that felt like progress. That evening, my commanding officer stopped by my office. She'd heard the story, because in the military, stories always travel. "You handled it well," she said simply. "Don't shrink back now." I didn't plan to. Because something had changed. Not the way people saw me, but the way I saw myself. I'd drawn a line, calmly, clearly, and without anger. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight of other people's assumptions. Valkyrie 6 wasn't just a call sign anymore. It was a reminder that quiet strength still carries force, and that sometimes, saying the truth once is enough to rewrite the entire room. I didn't hear from Mark for days after Emily and I talked at that coffee shop. And honestly, the silence told me more than any rushed apology could have. When people are embarrassed rather than remorseful, they tend to disappear. When they're actually reflecting, they take time. I let the space exist without trying to manage it. That was new for me. Work became my refuge again, but not the way it used to be. I wasn't hiding there anymore. I was choosing it. Preparing my squadron for an operational readiness inspection required focus, discipline, and long hours, but this time, the work felt grounding instead of numbing. My office was a place where clarity mattered more than personality, where outcomes spoke louder than assumptions. One evening, my commanding officer stopped by my desk, leaning casually against the doorway. "I heard about the barbecue," she said. "Word travels." "I'm sure it does, ma'am." She studied me for a moment. "You didn't escalate. You didn't apologize for existing. You stated the truth and left. That's leadership, whether it happens in a briefing room or a backyard." I hadn't thought of it that way. But hearing it reframed something in me. For years, I'd believed leadership only counted when it wore rank and insignia. I was learning that leadership also meant modeling boundaries, even when it made people uncomfortable. 2 days later, my phone rang at exactly 1800 hours. "Mark." Precise. Deliberate. I answered. "I owe you a real apology," he said without preamble. "Not the kind that tries to smooth things over. The kind that admits I was wrong." I stayed quiet and let him talk. "I spent years talking about service like it was a competition," he continued. "Like only one version counted. And when I realized you outranked me, not just in rank but in responsibility, it threatened me. Instead of dealing with that, I cut you down." There it was. Not perfect phrasing. Not polished. But honest. "I don't need you to admire my career," I said. "I need you to respect it. And I need you to understand that jokes can still be cruelty when they're one-sided." "I understand that now," he said. "And I won't do it again." "I believe you want to change," I replied. "But trust rebuilds through behavior, not promises. That takes time. I'll take whatever time it takes." When we hung up, I felt tired, but lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I hadn't compromised myself to keep the peace. That mattered. Emily and I spoke more often after that, cautiously at first. She asked real questions about my work, not the dramatic parts, but the daily responsibilities. The planning. The weight of decisions that never made headlines. She listened in a way she hadn't before, and I let myself answer without deflecting. A month later, my promotion board results came back early. Lieutenant Colonel. I stared at the notification longer than I expected to. It didn't feel explosive. It felt earned. Quiet. Settled. Like something that had been building for years finally arriving on time. When I told my parents, my mother cried. My father said he was proud in a voice that cracked just slightly. Emily screamed and insisted on planning something small. Mark congratulated me formally, respectfully, without jokes. That was progress. The promotion ceremony itself was brief and precise, the way military ceremonies are meant to be. Orders read. Insignia changed. Hands shaken. Photographs taken. Standing there in uniform, new rank on my collar, I realized something that surprised me. The call sign moment hadn't led to this promotion. But it had prepared me to accept it without minimizing myself. After the ceremony, Emily pulled me aside. "I used to think your job pulled you away from us," she said quietly. "Now I understand that it's part of who you are. And that doesn't make you distant." It makes you committed. That was the closest we'd come to naming the truth between us. A few weeks later, I received my next assignment. Command of an operations support squadron. More responsibility. More visibility. More weight. I accepted without hesitation. Not because it would be easy, but because I finally trusted myself to carry it without shrinking. On my last night before beginning the transition, I sat alone in my apartment, uniform hung neatly, boxes half-packed. The quiet felt different now. Not empty. Intentional. I thought back to that barbecue. To the laughter. To the moment I waited, breathed, and said 2 words without raising my voice. Valkyrie Six. That wasn't bravado. It wasn't a flex. It was clarity. And clarity changes dynamics faster than anger ever could. Here's what I learned. You don't have to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't have to list your accomplishments to earn basic respect. And you don't have to stay silent to be professional. Sometimes, all it takes is stating the truth once, calmly, and letting the room adjust. If this story resonated with you, take a moment and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you finally stopped shrinking and the room changed? What's a boundary you refuse to let family cross anymore? And if someone apologized later, did you accept it, or did you choose distance, and why? If you believe quiet strength still carries weight, tap like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs that reminder today. And tell me where you're listening from. You're not alone, even when the room gets loud. That night, I set a boundary, and the room learned my name.